I'm Jason Howell, and I recently spent time with two cutting-edge VR headsets, Apple's Vision Pro, available now, and Samsung's Project Moohan, mysterious and unreleased. I've experienced both firsthand, and I'm here to tell you the real revolution isn't in the hardware. It's in the invisible assistant living inside one of these devices. But is that enough? Well, I hopped in the car this weekend and headed to the Apple Store to find out. And you can actually jump directly to the comparison if you'd like by hitting the timecode below. I am going on a little short road trip. I'm actually driving up to Santa Rosa, which is not too far away from Petaluma, where I live. Probably about looks like navigation's saying a 20-minute drive. And I'm going there because of you. That's right, you're making me do it. Just this last week, I went to Mountain View and tested out Android XR and, of course, put up a video about that whole experience, articles and all that. It was a lot of fun. But I got a lot of people asking me to compare it against the Apple Vision Pro. And here's the thing, I have not used an Apple Vision Pro. So pretty hard for me to compare against it. But I recognize that because I had considerable amount of time with Samsung's Project Moohan VR device, which I think is kind of the direct comparison, the direct kind of analog to what Apple Vision Pro is, but for Android, at least at this point, as far as we know, that it puts me into an interesting position to where I can actually, if I have or do use Apple Vision Pro, I can draw some correlations, draw some lines between them. Do they do things similarly, differently, quality, all that kind of stuff. So that's my goal right now. Why don't I just go out to the Apple Store and book a demo? Anyone can book a demo and go and meet with someone at the Apple Store and sit down and experience the Apple Vision Pro. Apparently this demo takes around 30 minutes. It's probably very kind of restricted, it's probably a certain track and they show you a number of things and it's the same process for everyone, I'm guessing. But I definitely want to take a look and see what it's all about. I've been really curious for the last couple of years since we've known about it. And now that it's so easy and so accessible to put one of those headsets on your face without having to spend more than $3,000 for it. If I was to buy one, it would be a different story, but I'm not in the market for one right now, not for that much money. But anyways, I can go in there. I booked a demo. I'm going to sit down with them in about a half an hour from now. I'm going to sit down with them and check out the Apple Vision Pro. Now, I've got this camera mounted, so there's nothing unsafe going on here. I'm not handling it or anything. And I'm just kind of on my way. Y'all have also told me that you like the vlog style videos, so here I am doing it again. It only really works for, when I've got like an actual trip to take of some sort or excursion. Otherwise, I don't know how exciting me sitting at my desk, which is what I do 95% of the time, considering, what I do right now. So I don't know how exciting that would be. But I'm excited for this demo. I think the one big question is whether the person that I'm meeting with will be okay with me recording it. My plan is to bring in my Osmo Pocket 3 and with their permission, set it in front of me where I'm seated playing around with the Apple Vision Pro and just kind of capture the footage of me playing with it, not only because it's nice to have B-roll for videos, but also because it helps me to understand and remember my experience, my thoughts throughout the process. And I'm so curious to see, because I'm so fresh off of the Android XR prototype demos I had like a week and a half ago, a little more than a week ago. And especially with Project Moohan, which was just so much fun being in that simulated living room and, checking out the spatialized photos and checking out the maps experience and the media experience, sitting in a virtual kind of movie theater room, being able to throw windows around the screen, and also controlling with my eyes, and the many different control mechanisms, the multimodality of control. And I know with the Android XR experience, a big part of what Google is doing, as I've talked about, is about the integration of their Gemini AI into the experience and what that enables, that multimodality of the AI seeing what you see and helping to make context of everything as you're looking at it. That, I think, is going to be a big difference in the experience when I sit down with the Apple Vision Pro. I'm realizing as I'm driving there's a lot I really don't know about the Apple Vision Pro. The unfortunate part of my job, it's on one hand, it's fortunate. I've made a career out of being very knowledgeable about the Android operating system, and almost to a fault, because as much as I use Apple, MacBooks and computers, I have a really nice Mac Studio at home. As much as I use that hardware of Apple's, I've hardly used iOS devices, be it iPads, maybe iPads a little bit more than phones, but I haven't really used them enough to be incredibly familiar with some of the stuff that correlates with the Apple Vision Pro and what it enables and everything, little pieces here and there. So experiencing it, getting like a nice solid experiential sit down with it is going to be really beneficial to me, because I can finally answer some questions that I've had about it, but also being able to freshly draw lines between the two experiences. Because I think one big question I have is the Moohan device and what I saw with Android XR related to it, is this an answer to the Meta Quest series of hardware? Or is this an answer to Apple Vision Pro? Because I think the Apple Vision Pro, obviously is far more expensive, far more expansive potentially, with the Meta Quest being, more kind of rigidly specific to gaming and some multitasking and stuff. The Apple Vision Pro is, really meant to expand their platform, the iOS platform, into the virtual world and that augmented world. And so that's what I see from the outside looking in, the correlation between Android XR and what Apple is doing with Apple Vision Pro. That's the more direct comparison that I envision, that I anticipate. But I'm going to find out. So I don't have much more of a drive, and hopefully they let me record it while I'm there, and then I'll do some comparisons after. So hang tight, because we're on our way. Here, do a little bit of a merge, gets a lot of traffic. That's a pretty thing going on with that building. With the wind, today's a really windy day here. There's like trees down everywhere. That was a pretty nasty storm came through. So that's kind of the perfect wall for a windy day like today. Could be kind of difficult to find parking. It is 2 weeks until Christmas after all. Whew. Okay. I got the parking app downloaded. Got all my payment details in there. It was kind of like a scramble. I'm like 2 minutes till my appointment time. This just seems to be how I roll in life. Okay, Eagles landed. I'm inside now, just looking for an Apple store. Hopefully they don't yell at me because I'm late.
face right now. Hot face from the Apple Vision Pro. Get that Apple in the background. I have some thinking to do about how that compares to the hardware that I saw from Google. So I'm going to do some thinking about it. I wonder how many Apple Vision Pros Santa gives out for Christmas. My face is still kind of warm. That was definitely one thing that I noticed a little different in the Apple Vision Pro demo versus the Samsung headset is my face felt a lot warmer with the Apple Vision Pro than it did with Project Moohan. I don't know if that's just because I was in an Apple store filled with people or what. Obviously, I didn't have footage of the actual kind of session. I asked management and they politely refused me permission to record. You know, they said no recording inside the Apple store, which I felt like was kind of like a 50-50 chance. I've seen some people have gotten away with it, and others have not. But that's okay. It would have just been me with a thing strapped on my face. No big deal. All right, so I did that trip a couple of days ago. Again, I thought, like, should I just record my thoughts in the car on the drive home? And I decided against it, primarily because I wanted to kind of, take a little bit and add a little bit of a pause so that I can kind of digest a little bit of what I saw. But it's, I got to give Apple credit. It's pretty cool that you can just walk in there and sit down and get a 30-minute demo. It was pretty sweet. So having spent 30 minutes with the Apple Vision Pro, and then of course, Samsung's Project Moohan from, down at the Google campus a couple of weeks ago, I now have the ability to take those two 30-minute experiences and kind of compare them as best as I can. So do note that this is purely subjective, right? There's a lot of details that we don't actually know about the Samsung headset yet, Project Moohan. It's early. We know it's going to be released next year. They're going to, release a lot of this information from now until then. And so we gotta kind of be a little patient about that. But for now, what I can bring is a look at what my experience was putting both of these headsets on my face and going through kind of the demos in both cases, one at Google and then one at the Apple Store. Why don't we start with build quality? And, starting with the Apple Vision Pro, I mean, this is an expensive device. And I have to say, like, it was really interesting. They brought it out on this tray. It was almost like they were serving me a really expensive meal of some sort. And they brought it out. It was very fragile and delicate. And it looked, all polished and beautiful and everything. So it was quite the presentation when they brought it out. Very clothy design. I'd say that was kind of like my first thought when I saw the VR headset. Just a lot of cloth everywhere. Of course, cloth doesn't have any sort of rigidity, so there is structure to it. There's, a nice metallic surround, those metallic touches that really scream premium. And just kind of rounded, polished. It's just a very pretty looking device, if not, very large, but really rounded, curved eyeglass really stood out to me, which I'd seen in the photos, but I hadn't really seen it in person. It's just, man, everything is just so smooth and curvy and round. It looks comfortable and expensive when you see it there served on a platter. It does have some speakers embedded into the straps. I thought that was interesting. These large kind of like flat looking speakers on each of the straps sounded excellent. And I was in the Apple Store during the holidays on a Saturday. So it was super noisy there. And even though I was able to turn up the volume and the speakers were able to overcome the noise in the store, which was great. Battery pack for your pocket, although I was seated for my demo, but yes, it had the battery pack that sat on the table and you can put that into your pocket. eyesight is definitely one thing that really stands out as a differentiator anyways for Apple Vision Pro. This is the feature that allows you to see eyes on the other side of the goggles. I did not get to see that firsthand with my own actual real eyes, but I do want to call it out because it is a feature that doesn't exist on, as far as I know, any other VR headset out there. It's truly unique to the Apple Vision Pro. Then we've got Samsung's Project Moohan. And when we're talking about build quality, a lot of, I think, similar first impression for me. And maybe that would have been different if I had seen the Apple Vision Pro first. But when Project Moohan came out to me at my demo, I immediately thought like, wow, this is a really premium looking piece of hardware, very curvy. That front glass especially has some curves, though not quite as curvy as the Apple Vision Pro. Had the metallic framing around the surround of the front. So, kind of made it just kind of seem a little bit more durable, more structured from that regard. Definitely one of the characteristics that you notice when you look at Project Moohan, it has this very large hood cover that blocks the top light coming in and did a really effective job of that. And then, of course, the optional bottom cover, I can't remember what they called it, but a little flap that you could either choose to put in place to block the light coming in from below, and not just the light, but the actual view of the floor and everything. It's a wide enough gap that it allows you to kind of take in a little bit of that, the real room, and which could potentially enhance the AR effects that you see through the display. Or you could put this cover on and go completely immersive, which is actually what I opted to do when I did the demo. Battery pack fit in my left pocket, cord, structured long enough and didn't get in the way. It was totally fine. And again, no eyes on the goggles. When we're talking comfort, the Apple Vision Pro, actually in both cases, it was 30 minutes that I spent inside each of the headsets. I went back on my Project Moohan audio recording and timed it, and it was right about 30 minutes. Apple Vision Pro, right about 30 minutes as well. The head strap, it's kind of like a clothy thing. And very comfortable, very soft, Velcro fasteners, like a light Velcro. You're not like pulling as hard as you can to get the Velcro, to rip off and to fasten and everything. It was pretty easy to use. I did notice with the Apple Vision Pro, you get that top strap that goes over the top of your head for additional top-down support there. And that could be helpful, especially when you're talking about these, really heavy face computers. Speaking of heavy, definitely noticed the weight immediately when I was taking it off that tray, the platter, the all-you-can-eat Apple Vision Pro platter. It definitely felt, like I was being really careful. They instructed me to grab it with, my hands in a very specific place. Probably they've had people in demos pick it up on the side and push a button, or who knows, or smudge it up or whatever. So anyways, I felt the weight immediately in my hands. And by the end of the 30 minutes, I definitely noticed, and this could have been a condition of the room that I was in. There were a ton of people there, right? There was a lot of movement in the room and everything, but my face was really warm at the end of my demo, and I've had this with VR headsets before where you put it on, you do your thing. And then at the end, it's like I call it hot face, or my face just feels kind of like red and warm. And I definitely got that by the end of the Apple Vision Pro demo. It wasn't overwhelming, but it was definitely noticeable. With Project Moohan, again, 30 minutes. The head strap did not have any of the over-the-top kind of attachment. Maybe that'll be a bonus that you can include later, but it certainly wasn't with the demo unit that I used. It was a bit less form-fitting, I'd say, a bit more rigid. Just in general, the head strap has a rigidity that maybe is more like the Meta Quest 3. If I'm not mistaken, I've not used the Meta Quest 3, but that's my understanding, is that the head strap on the Project Moohan is more similar to that. It did have a knob back here that you can tighten, like a satisfying kind of clicky, twisty knob that, kind of cinched it around the head. And so I found a nice, comfortable place there. I didn't feel like my brains were getting squeezed or anything like that. I felt like it was pretty comfortable, honestly. And notably, I do not recall at the end of that demo feeling any face warmth, any of that hot face. And again, This could entirely be the fact that I was doing it in a very controlled environment. They were setting up a scenario, they're showing off their new product and they want to show it off in the best possible way. So it's possible that they changed the climate conditions in that room to account for that. I don't really remember feeling any of that warmth. And also the weight of the device didn't really stand out to me while I was wearing it or in my hand. It felt reasonable. So I have to guess that this device weighs less than the Apple Vision Pro. And we will find out, time will tell as more specifications are released on this. Okay, control methods. This is a real important area because there's some definite distinctions here between Apple Vision Pro and the Project Moohan. As far as hand controls, first of all, both of them have the kind of standard hand controls, right? The pinch with the pointer finger and the thumb to like click on something, the pinch swipe to like swipe left and right or move, scroll up and down on a web page, that sort of stuff. Two-handed pinch to grow and shrink. Trying to remember, I know that's how it is on the Apple Vision Pro. I'm trying to remember if that was the methodology on Project Moohan, and I'm coming up short on that. Like I do know that I grew windows by hovering over like the frame of the bottom of the corner of one of the corners of the window. And when you hover over it, it kind of changes the iconography or gives you this graphical thing that you can grab onto and resize. I can't remember if you can do the two-handed pinch to grow or shrink the windows. But now that I think about it, I don't think you can do that on the windows within the Apple Vision Pro either. It's just other objects that you could do that with. And definitely there were certain objects in Project Moohan where you could do that. The ray pointing methodology, which you hold up your hand from your perspective, you see this line kind of shooting out from your hand, and where that line terminates is essentially the cursor or the point, the pinpoint of what you're pointing at. And so you can hold your hand up here, it shoots out this ray, and then when I'm on the right thing, I can pinch and it clicks it. Now you can do that with Moohan, and I initially thought that you couldn't do that with the Apple Vision Pro, but it turns out it's an accessibility feature that you can activate. So they both have that ray pointing feature. Moohan does have a trackpad surface on the side of the headset, so that gives you some more control. Apple Vision Pro does not have that. Really, it seemed to me in my short time with both of these devices that the Apple Vision Pro is not really as designed to be controlled just with the hands. It really relies more on eye controls as a standard. And this is something that both of the devices have. Eye tracking control done very similarly, look and pinch. And has a very similar setup, although I will say Apple's eye control setup took 3 times as long as the Samsung Project Moohan one. It just had more steps in it. So does that make it better or worse? I never noticed a part of the experience in either of them where I was like, this could be better. It was pretty solid in both cases. So there's that. Both of them have downward facing cameras that allow you to keep your hands in your lap for pinching when you're looking at something. That way you don't have to hold your hand up and use it to pinch that way, which can be kind of a pain in the butt. The Apple Vision Pro tracking just seemed to be, honestly, for me, the primary control mechanism. The intended control mechanism is you use your eyes to look and point, you use your hands to click. And with Project Moohan, as we're going to talk about, eye tracking control was just one of many control methods. And I know that there are other control methods on the Apple Vision Pro. I'm not saying that there aren't. I'm just saying it seems like with the Apple Vision Pro, that is what they're trying to get you to do, is to use your eyes, and that's the main way. And I would say the eye control is an option for Project Moohan, but is by no means the main way. I mean, it's one of the main ways, but you've also got your hand control. You've also got peripheral controls, which both of them support. So external Bluetooth controls, keyboard, mouse, hand controllers, that sort of stuff. Both of them support that. I did read right before recording this that it's confirmed that Project Moohan will have hand controllers. although there's no word on whether they're going to actually ship with the unit when you buy it. Voice control is another one, and this is another biggie, okay? Apple Vision Pro, Siri. So you've got Siri on board. You can use your voice with Siri for commands, for device control, for text input, and really it's, it's all part of the accessibility feature set is voice control. Again, I think the primary here is we want you to use your eyes. With Moohan, you've got Gemini, Project Gemini for commands, for device control, for text input. But voice is really a core component of control because Gemini is really being emphasized here on a platform level. And this is a really big differentiation point. Voice isn't just about control here. It's about conversational context in the whole experience, something I'm going to talk about in a moment. Another big point here is that Moohan has this multimodality of control approach versus Apple's kind of more rigid approach. Apple does offer other ways of control, but again, it really seems like they're targeting a couple of key things that they want you to do, which is kind of part of Apple's ethos, right? And it's kind of a running joke is that Apple tells you how you want to use your device. They've always kind of done that. The visual effect. Okay, both of them, presented movies and videos in a very sharp, high resolution, sometimes wrapped way. I mean, the acuity of movies and videos was just excellent on both headsets. From my experience, from my subjective experience. Virtual objects that sit on top of the pass-through looked very sharp and clear. Sometimes, and I know with Moohan, there were some virtual objects that I was like, oh my God, I've never seen this kind of clarity in VR. And certainly saw that with some elements in the Apple Vision Pro too, when you're looking at your home screen with the icons and everything, and your eye goes over them and it kind of turns them from flat 2D to kind of having some depth and stuff. The clarity around those icons and some of the environments were really interesting and highly detailed. Honestly, the resolution between the two was pretty equal to my eyes. We don't actually know the resolution of Project Moohan yet, so I'm really curious to see when that comes out, what that will be. I did notice on the Apple Vision Pro, this definitely stood out to me, is that the pass-through camera had a certain level of flickering, which indicates to me a lower frame rate at times. I don't know what the cause of that was, but I definitely noticed it. It definitely stood out to me. It wasn't all the time, or my eyes just got used to it. But when I first started seeing the pass-through camera, I was like, whoa, there's some, like I felt like I was seeing kind of some of that lower frame rate flickering. I loved the effect of the fade in, fade out when people are present in the room. If I turned around to the guy who was giving me a demo and he started to come into view, if I was in fully immersive mode, when I started to look at him, the camera would sense that there was someone there and it would start to kind of fade out and let through the pass through so that I could see him. That was a neat effect. I really enjoyed that. The crown, because the headset does have a digital crown on it, was used for fading environments in and out and kind of going immersive to not as immersive, that sort of stuff. Really nice premium touch. It just, I mean, the interaction with it just feels really, polished and premium, and it worked as expected. With Project Moohan, I felt that I could push windows behind objects in a room. They didn't always stay there. If I pushed a window behind a chair that was actually in the room, it would know that there was a chair there and kind of fade out there, but it wouldn't stay positioned there when I let go. It would then kind of appear on top. But I really appreciated the kind of contextual awareness or the depth awareness of that there. And then I would say if I had to compare the two, slightly less field of view on Project Moohan when compared to the Apple Vision Pro. I do want to see that in specs, but that's just something that I kind of stood out to me that I kind of noticed. Ecosystem integration. This is something that both Samsung and Apple are very well known for. Apple Vision Pro, deeply integrated with the Apple ecosystem, with iOS devices and all that. You've got AirPlay from devices to the Apple Vision Pro for that immersive playback. You've got iCloud integration. Apple has, of course, its library of apps that it's form-fitted for the headset, contacts, calendar, Apple Music, Siri, all these things. productivity apps by Apple, Pages, Numbers, Keynote, all that stuff. Most iPad OS and iOS frameworks are supported on the OS, so the OS is very integrated. Video conferencing, of course, using Apple's existing services. And then for developers, similar toolkit for them to use as well. Xcode, SwiftUI, RealityKit, ARKit, and more to create those apps for visionOS too, along with the visionOS SDK, right? Now with Project Moohan, it's integrated with a Google ecosystem, likely also Samsung's in many ways. This is one of those areas that's kind of hard to know exactly where this device is going to hit because we don't have the details yet. Plenty of Google apps shown off during my demo. So Chrome, Photos, YouTube TV, Maps, Play Movies. Obviously the Google apps are going to be tailored and fit into it. And a lot of kind of the ecosystem, the Google ecosystem stuff that you experience on Android smartphones probably coming over in the headset. Samsung, I have to imagine Samsung's going to have some of its own ecosystem roped in as well, but I don't know anything specific about that, but it's Samsung we're talking about. The developer documents indicate that most Android apps are going to run on Android XR unless there's required hardware for that app to run that is missing. Toolkit and support for developers, still more to learn there, but I know that Unity's on board, so I can hope that that means that, porting over of, some of those, the apps on the Meta Quest is going to be pretty easy. Unity says it's going to be incredibly easy to do that. Availability, Apple Vision Pro, obviously, it's out now. It's been out publicly since February. Project Moohan, the only thing we know is sometime next year, sometime in 2025. But, we've got Unpacked. We've got Samsung's kind of device announcement event coming up in January. Could it be that early? I don't know. But I'm making a guess, but I would be really surprised if they didn't show it off in some way, shape, or form at that event. So that's something to look forward to. Price and Apple Vision Pro, ridiculously expensive. It's what a lot of people criticize it for. $34.99. That's $3,499 for that VR headset. The Project Moohan, no clue on the price. I'm guessing much less. Although, when I take a look at like my experience with both of them, like they're pretty similar in so many ways. But I think Samsung has to price this less. Now, is it going to be $1,000? Is it going to be $1,500? What is the price that the market can bear? That remains a real big mystery, but you don't have to go very far to beat $3,500 when you're talking about, the price of the headset. So what's so unique about the Samsung Project Moohan headset that I teased earlier? Well, you can probably guess right now, it's all in the AI, the artificial intelligence. And this is a big differentiator. Apple Vision Pro has Siri on board, and Siri can carry out single tasks, let's say. Siri can also contextually, it can hear you in order to respond. Project Moohan, on the other hand, it's packing the power of Android XR. So Gemini is on board. Gemini can hear you. It can hear the environment. Gemini can see the virtual world. Anything on your screen that's a virtual object, it can see that and interact with that in some way. Gemini can see your real world. So if you have pass-through camera and you've opted in for that, it can see everything in the real world and have that be part of the conversation. Speaking of that, Gemini can carry on a conversation. So you can open up a conversation with Gemini and keep going and keep it going and twist and turn and not have any syntax and have it guess and understand hopefully what you're talking about. Gemini has memory of what it sees, what it hears, what it communicates. And apparently, according to some recent articles, that memory is limited to the last 10 minutes. So it's not unlimited amount of memory, but it does also save key details of past conversations. And I think the artificial intelligence layer in all of this really is the standout differentiation, which isn't a Samsung thing as much as it is a Google/Android XR thing. So then the question, AI is at this point where it's continuing to be embraced by some people, ridiculed by others. So does this defining feature give the Moohan headset a distinct market advantage? Or does it really not matter all that much? honestly, I think it depends on who you ask. Some people, they're loving it. And some people, they can't get to the post-AI world fast enough. And I'm curious to know what you think about this. Leave a comment below. Let's talk about it in the comments. Let me know how you feel, where you stand on this question. And also do be sure to check out my in-depth walkthrough of my exclusive look at Android XR, Samsung's Project Moohan, and Google's Project Astra. Thank you everybody so much for watching. I'm Jason Howell. We'll see you next time.